next talk, Helsinki's Chief Design Officer Hannah Harris will share learnings from the city's design journey and discuss how with design cities can create increasingly sustainable urban futures. So, Hannah, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome on stage. Hannah Harris.
It's not here. This is on siellä. Excellent. Right, Adam, I don't have a joke, but I do have a pen, and I'm always up for a dance, so we'll see which one we'll do. Okay, I know it's been a long day. You've had absolutely fantastic things throughout the building, and a bit of running back and forth with fire alarms and whatnot, but we will end today by bringing us back to Helsinki, where we are. And I must say, on behalf of the city of Helsinki, all our designers, and the entire design community in Helsinki, we are extremely happy to have this conference here in Helsinki. You are a massive, massive crowd. What's going on? Massive, massive crowd, and you online. So well done for being here, and for you online, and huge congratulations to the award winners as well. What we'll do here now at the end is tell a little bit about that journey that was mentioned here already, that how does something like design and service design land inside a city? What does that mean? What kind of structures there are, and what kind of very concrete things happen along the way, and how that grows. But we'll start by saying that when you look at something, and this often gets asked from me because there's kind of two levels going on here. There's Helsinki, where you are now, there's the design community, there's Ornamo, there's Service Design Chapter Finland, there's all sorts of stuff going on, there's Aalto University, and there's all of that community. And then there's kind of zooming back into the kind of administrative organizational body that is the city of Helsinki, which is the single largest employer in the country of Finland. We're close to 40,000 people at the city, including, frontline workers, teachers, health sector, and so forth. But these two are, of course, intertwined. And back in, actually, a year or two before the World Design Capital Project in 2012, this community really came together that, okay, we are going to celebrate all things design. We are going to use them, squeeze them, make them into something that has a bang effect outside of kind of the design community itself. I was based in London at the time following this journey, and ending up actually delivering lots of so-called satellite programming for the Design Capital Year, and network building, and all sorts of stuff behind the scene. But Design Capital Year 2012 was a year where there were hundreds of projects. There were public events, there were research projects, there were all kinds of things going on with different businesses, and that was kind of a celebration year. What is absolutely critical from the city of Helsinki's perspective is that after that year, there was an awakening, and this, of course, coincides pretty much with, there had been kind of early trainings of, oh, maybe we should think about service design at the city, kind of leading up to this year already, and a bit of like, well, are there some pioneers? Would somebody perhaps be interested? And that year really was like, okay, there's something here that an organization like the city, essentially a massive service provider in lots of different sectors, should be interested in. And from there on, so we started putting together legacy structures. This is absolutely critical in terms of making the stuff stick. So we had a thing called Design Driven City for a couple of years, where we started hiring the first designers inside the city. There were different, on-demand transport pilots, co-living experiments between different generations. There was stuff like this happening. And then we thought, okay, yeah, maybe we should maybe these roles should become a little bit more permanent. Maybe we should set up some kind of lab. Maybe we need some kind of person who is acting as like the bridge builder or glue or spokesperson, and moving between the operational and the strategic level, which is where the role of the chief design officer came in. And I'm now the second person in this role. But there was stuff going on a very strategic level, like there are in cities, and of course on the ground. And beside that, of course, we had to continue working with the larger design community here. That's the universities, that's the main design events, things like Helsinki Design Week, the largest of its kind in the Nordics. And then started happening stuff like, okay, Helsinki also wants to be ambitious in all things digital. We want to develop all things participation and so forth. And these started growing and snowballing together. And it's kind of crucial to say that every now and then, because cities are sort of, they're quite messy in many ways. There's not one single vision or mission or like there's lots of different stuff going on. And every now and then you need also these sort of beacons, if you wish, like the design capital year was that brought stuff together. And now kind of 10 years down the line, the beacon that we have now that everybody's also working towards is that we have the new Museum of Architecture and Design that's coming here. That, of course, is a different type of beacon to an all-year celebration. But again, there's something that the community has come together, two existing museums, the state, the city, the entire design community, including the education, to, okay, that there's a place that radiates outside of the community as well and looks at the world through the lens of design. So that's kind of important to keep in mind, that there's the systemic stuff, and then the kind of beacons that communicate to all kinds of communities. But so back to Helsinki, that sort of 10 years, 12 years down the line that we've been growing the use of design, and why do we still think that that's what needs to be done? Yes, there's of course different services that get designed. They might be tangible things, they might be immaterial things, but we of course want them to be the best possible services that they are. But having now looked at this for 4 years from inside the city, it's really a cultural shift as much as anything. It's a cultural shift of working together with and for the different people and communities of Helsinki. And increasingly so, it's about collaboration across different administrative borders and helping in solving things that don't fit neatly into, look, this is some education department deals with this, or social and health deals with this. It's as much as anything about collaboration and creative bridging. And then if you look at things like customer experience or employee experience, of course, these get totally intertwined. If you've got those 40,000 people, a big majority of them are also the customers and the people living in Helsinki and then cross-using different services across the city. But this is absolutely critical. There's stuff that gets done in the front line, and there's stuff that gets done in the kind of system itself. And alongside that, there's all the time the design continues to be among the top topics that people coming from outside of Helsinki to live here, work here, study here, visit as tourists are interested in. So there's that external brand value at the same time, all the time. And that is increasingly radiating to everything strategic and leadership structures inside the city. We want to offer support for doing stuff better and for doing better things, and we'll finish off with that in a second. Now, if you look at the how and where does this get done and who's doing these things in the city, and there's actually not a totally simple answer for this. The data is a little bit tricky in many ways because it has become so penetrated into very different sectors and different operations inside the city. But when you work in an environment like the public sector, it's really important to look at things like procurement. What kind of longer partnership deals you have in place? Where can you have that power and muscle that goes beyond single experiments or single projects and really drills inside the system? Somewhere like the city, partnership agreements, puitesopimukset are one of these tools. And in Helsinki, we started working on one on service design immediately after the World Design Capital Year. So we are now in the third multi-year partnership agreement at the moment. And before this one that started in 2022, so we did quite extensive research with our existing partners across different divisions in the city who were doing different design work with our partners, and kind of about what's coming out from there, what should we take into consideration in the future. We currently do regular work with 12 design agency partners, somewhere around 200 projects a year, and currently we're looking at somewhere around 5 million the contract kind of level of what goes in there. But that's of course coupled, and this is always a tricky balance, that how much are we want to challenge and work with outside knowledge, of course, and at the same time we want to build the capabilities inside the city. So if I'm this kind of like, I often like to think that I'm kind of the design whisperer or the spokesperson or the invisible glue, or almost like detective work often, that where can we identify cracks where we can amplify stuff. But then of course we have, and then many of them, all of you, there are many of my colleagues here, if you can raise your hand a little bit, they are coupled around there, there are some more over there, so we have absolutely fantastic designers working inside the city in different roles. Now, the data of that is quite hard to get as well, because we have people who they have somehow design in their title, but then, and this is really crucial, we have a whole community of designers or design-minded people, hundreds of them across the city in different roles at different levels of the city, who want to use as more like a cultural thing. We heard earlier in some of the talks today about kind of the culture of design, and that's certainly happening in the city in different parts. So we're kind of moving from like kind of a design lab functions to a more strategic development teams where we tap in design knowledge together with other stuff going in the city and see where we can take that further. But yeah, so even in the, not even since Design Capital year, but in the past few years alone, it's more than 12 times the volume that is growing, and we see an absolute critical need for it. And importantly, the need is all across the city, in all our operations. Our administrative structures that we have 4 main divisions: urban environment, culture and leisure, education and social services and health. And then they work together with our central administration. Some of you were yesterday at our event at the City Hall lobby. That itself is one of our design projects, how we can make a space that in itself kind of connects the political power and that seat for that to activities that we do with citizens and how those two communicate with each other. So all divisions use this. Now, there will be, of course, different levels of maturity, different kind of ways how that happens, but all divisions use design. And we, of course, as the kind of central agents, try and help them figure out what that means in their cases. And now that I mentioned the partnership agreement and what's happening there at the moment, so at the moment we have like 3 baskets in there. One is services and organization, digital, of course, growing very strongly, and then increasingly the kind of spatial aspect of service environments. There's been a huge need for that. Now, if partnership agreements are one thing that are in somewhere like a city absolutely critical tools to kind of in a strategic way see what something like service design could mean, how can you spread the use of it and try and figure out how you grow the impact of that. I think if you are something like a city, we have tried to think that we have responsibility to be the kind of client who also shares some of that information, and agencies who work with us have very much shared this vision at the kind of stuff that is done with the city, that there's a responsibility to sort of discuss it and share it across the divisions and try and grow the impact of let's say, something done in, for instance, the culture division, and what does that mean somewhere else? Because, of course, the people of Helsinki are happily mixing between all of these, and they think like the city is one thing, whereas, of course, in reality, it's not really one thing, but we try and kind of find that space. So the other thing that is critical to grow the journey is political support. And this, of course, in cities is there's, you know, the everyday work that keeps going on, and then we have here in Helsinki a 4-year cycle of municipal elections. The next ones are coming up next spring. Now, we have had design acknowledged in all city strategies since the Design Capital of the Year. This has been absolutely critical as well in order to continue on the journey. And that means that there's acknowledgement of what it means internally, why we should work with design, and then there's the external factor as well of what that kind of what kind of a city Helsinki also is in terms of what it communicates outwardly, that they both go there hand in hand. It helps, of course, that there are awards that come and you can communicate about them. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Our design system got a Grand One award just very recently. We've had amazing work done with how playgrounds attract different communities and how we can take that forward. In Grafia's Vuoden huiput a couple of years ago. And then there's the already yesterday Birgit mentioned Oodi Central Library. So I have to say a couple of words about Oodi if you haven't been there. Now, this is Oodi Central Library by Ala Architects 2018. It's a result of, at the time, the largest open architectural competition in Helsinki. This was in Design Capital year. There were well over 500 entries to that competition, and now actually the new Architecture and Design Museum went past because there were 623 entries to that competition, and this was 550 or so. But yeah, so of course, it's like a landmark building. It's a kind of flagship architectural project by a Helsinki-based architecture office. But very importantly, hand in hand with that, now the clicker, no, there we go, has been that what does it mean to be a library today, and how did that come about? There was a lot of work that went into the program of the design competition before that happened, and that work continued after the winners were selected. The architects continued working on the concept. This has been one of our largest public participation projects. There have been thousands of citizens involved in it, and how the library continues to run its services. It doesn't stop there when the building is ready. How do they continue to work with their staff, work with people in there? That has been absolutely critical and continues to grow. But perhaps even more importantly, the building is loved. It's like people love it. You'll find teenagers, you go any moment of the day there, they're playing chess, they're doing, you'll have digital guidance clinics for the elderly, you'll have teenagers doing their homework, you have German neurosurgeons 3D printing brains, which I just encountered the other day. But this beacon has acted as a model for developing the entire library network in Helsinki, close to 40 libraries. The use of libraries has gone up, not just in Oodi, but across the network, new people registering for it, and this has been, like, the library perhaps has been one of the pioneers of using service design and design in all of the City of Helsinki services, and as this, it communicates. It's like, there was a really interesting talk earlier today about social spaces and the kind of everydayness of what we can do as designers. And libraries here have been that space. It's a space for really sharing, learning, no obligations, and building something that's active citizenship. And I mean, it's kind of, what more can you hope for in the city? This is also interesting because it's eye level, face to face with national parliament, so it's really kind of that symbolically quite important. But at the same time, of course, all things digital are really critical. Now, we've recently completed, some of them are here as well, an excellent design team working on our entire city's website renewal, hell.fi, and how kind of that's been one of our massive big service design projects. But important here perhaps, yes, there's the website and how good it is, but it's about something that all the service design work gone into it has really been about a human-centered approach, where we're not looking at those administrative borders, but themes, inclusiveness, breaking borders, and learning from those learnings to take into the actual services themselves. So it comes back to the people of Helsinki and to very everyday moments. Now, one area where, when I came into the job and there was a need to kind of also kind of grow the work with the urban environment department and planning and architecture. And one thing that was really coming out, and perhaps this is also something that has accelerated after the pandemic, is that Helsinki is a city that grows. We continue to grow after the pandemic as well. And at the same time, those growth processes and urban planning is, of course, slow. It's very slow. There's always conflict. There's all kinds of stuff going on in terms of housing, of transport, massive arguments and different views about what we should do with that. And sometimes amidst that big scale, the kind of everyday and the here and now gets forgotten or it's difficult for people to understand. So we've been working on looking at projects now in the first stage in some suburban regeneration areas where we've looked at something that's not a new design tool at all. You can talk about placemaking or you can use another word if you find it fit, but the really key thing is about bringing the people there, testing out stuff, taking that knowledge, bringing it back onto the architects and the designers and planners table for those things that happen somewhere further down the line, and doing it at the right moment in time where it matters and where people feel that they are part of their own communities and change that happens in them. Here in the middle is Päivi Raivio, a great designer here in Helsinki working on such matters. She received the Helsinki Design Award a couple of years ago, and there's been huge need for this. Like we need to kind of scale up this stuff massively. In order to support those kind of concrete experiments on the ground, let's say there's a square going into renovation, we'll test stuff that goes there, tap into what's appreciated in the area, is the more systemic view. Do people out there, and importantly, do we inside the system even enough understand what the planning system is and what happens at different levels? So we last year did the systemic design project about that, about really kind of trying to better understand the different levels of the planning system, what happens there, so that we can better, between the experts and with the people in those neighborhoods, together work on the moments where actually you can be part of it and where it has impact. We have different blog posts of some of these things on design.hel.fi, including this one, and I invite you to have a look at that. One group where you, something like the city, if you think about those places where you can really have impact and which is something that where the city absolutely has access. One thing, of course, is children and young people and through schools and the work that we do in schools. Like if you want to do something on big scale with young people, you work with the cities. I mean, there are other things, but that's kind of, there's big stuff there. And we've been for quite many years already, Ornamo has been part of that work as well, been working with different design education and design thinking methods in our schools. One of them has been particularly focused on this. Arabia Comprehensive School at last year won the Helsinki Design Award. I went there and spoke with the kids there that like, what does this design stuff mean for you? Why is it important? And they said, we are trying and testing stuff together. We are being creative, and if we fail, we're not afraid and we start again. That's what it's about for us. We dare to do it, and we do it together, and we will do it again. And we've been working quite a lot with some of these now kind of quick experiments of improving, for instance, sense of safety for kids out there, and being able to demonstrate that there are things where you can, by very concrete, seemingly small actions, achieve big impact, where you can give a sense of, I'm part of this community and my voice can be heard. We've just last week actually were given the UNICEF Child-Friendly City status as the first Nordic capital, and the work of course continues. But that has led us to look at really again the kind of systemic view. We were part of the Bloomberg Harvard City collaboration track where we were looking in one particular neighborhood at these issues, and that has led to lots of leadership model developments, strategic development of where and how these issues get looked at in the city. What does the education department do? What happens in the schools? How do we collaborate with the police? How do we collaborate with NGOs in the areas, and so forth? So very concrete actions that have to be there all the time with the kids, are communicating with the strategic and with the leadership models, and design has been absolutely critical there. Now, I said in the beginning that alongside the systemic, you need the kind of, you also need those tangible, visible things that make it easier to communicate to, for instance, decision makers, and so forth about the power of design. Now, Deputy Mayor Johanna Laisaari already yesterday mentioned this first thematic playground that we have just opened this Tuesday here in Helsinki, but I want to say a couple of more words about it. So, Playgrounds in Helsinki, a little bit like the libraries, are kind of essential social infrastructure. You will find them in every neighborhood. And very importantly, in addition to the kind of physical space or how that has evolved over years, is how there are people, there are trained staff who organize activities for free for all children, independent of their background. This has continued in Helsinki for longer than the kind of age of the Finnish state as we know it at the moment, so for 110 years, through the wars, through the pandemic, and we've kind of done some award-winning design work with Pentagon Design already earlier. I mentioned on this kind of what that means and how do increasingly diversifying communities find these spaces. But at the same time, the kind of hunger of the public of, what are public spaces like? Are they playful enough? Are they kind of adventurous enough? There's been quite a big discussion going on in Finland about this lately. And in comes a woman called Linda Liukas, who is an amazing author, illustrator, who works with how do kids and particularly girls learn about coding, how do you creatively use computers, what is sequencing, what are binary numbers, what are algorithms. And Linda she's done books, they've been translated in probably most of your countries, you'll find them. She does amazing work, but she was kind of like, what if all of this became a physical public playground without any tech? No tech, all analog, crawling. You learn about algorithms through crawling and different activities that you do in a public playground. So we started working with her, paired her with landscape architects Näkymä, started looking at special equipment, where this should be, and found the Ruoholahti public playground in need of renovation and located in an accessible point of the city, close to lots of gaming companies, close to a cable factory where the first ever computer in Helsinki was located, and have opened this park that's open for everyone. But I think here again, so we have worked, yes, there's the park design, but we've been working extremely closely with the local communities there, looking at what work there already, where we will take this design forward, and again, involving people in that park, and not only that park, taking those learnings on board for other future parks. That has been critical. And alongside the park itself, we've published a whole set of little activities and educational material that families can access, but importantly, teachers and educators can access. So there's this level which is kind of, Linda calls it the software of the park. If the park is the hardware and the software is stuff that taps into our digital national curriculum targets, it taps into all of this stuff, and classes can go there and do stuff in class after or before the visit. And there has been a lot of design thinking going in that work as well. So you need these beacons, but you also need, in cities, policy tools. We've just recently passed a new architecture program for Helsinki, which looks at public spaces, it looks at housing, it looks at climate and so forth. But in there as well, we have acknowledged that looking at the urban environment, there are many areas where we can use service design and we can use design thinking, and some of these projects that I spoke about have now kind of the political commitment in a policy program which will give us muscle to take that stuff forward. Now, to wrap it up in terms of like impact and what kind of things cities can best access. So this week has been amazing. We were looking at the program with our own community, that what can we contribute to the program. There's been earlier in the week a really great Designing for Governance event here as a pre-event taking place together with the Design for Governance community and Aalto University. And we thought, okay, there's something that we want to kind of make an actual statement and pledge about, that where we can do something. And that's the environmental sustainability that has actually been today as well. There have been great talks about that. So we decided that on yesterday's, some of you were perhaps there, so in yesterday's when there were many sessions, we thought as a city that this is what we want to work on. So my colleague Piritta Hannonen, Jaakko Hannula and Emma Berg, who are all somewhere here, did amazing work in pulling together an event at how to Helsinki's climate targets. We've got a climate unit that works on those things, but how can we, as designers in different positions, help, and where does our kind of field work there? And very interestingly, so Emma and Jaakko took on this model of the 3 horizons, at where do we do business as usual, where do we perhaps have transitions, and where are we working on something that could be something that's long-term, something that requires some form of jumps, and what the intersections of these are. And I think that was extremely fit for when you look at something like cities as organizations and the questions kind of impact. It is often messy. It kind of goes like this, but it becomes cultural, and we need to be very mindful about what are the things that particularly cities can affect, because we're there part in everyday lives of people. It runs from kids, it runs to all kinds of different solutions that the cities offer, services, and importantly, of course, there's that effect that there's what the city itself does, and then there is the working together with the broader design community. So events like this, and with organizations like Ornamo or the Service Design Network Chapter Finland. And so that work continues. We try and do our best as be an enabler and platformer, and when needed, give some perhaps kind of public sector or authority or kind of approval or some kind of muscle to things where we can, but it's been an absolute pleasure to see that journey grow, and we hope to see it grow into the future. You'll find a little bit more about Helsinki's story on this website. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanna. Super inspiring. And we have also quite delicious questions here for you.
Oh,
but if we take a couple of questions. So, was it, or how difficult was it to change the mindset of people from the city administration and convince them to invest in service design?
Well, so I have one colleague who has actually worked this whole path, who's been at the city at the stage when, of course, this putting together the bid for the design capital was a massive kind of exercise in itself. And sometimes before that, there'd been this like, you need to push. They're the pioneers, the library people were some of the early pioneers, but it was kind of this like, oh, well, what's this and why should it matter to us? The design capital year definitely helped. That was like this explosion of discussions, why might we do this? How can this help the broader design community? How can this help business? How can this help improve the services? So that helped. And perhaps, that was a really moment.
So it was like coming together and
it was
coming like stronger together,
yes,
kind of.
Yes, there was a coming together moment, but I think we kind of need to acknowledge that you need those kind of moments every now and then. This is, of course, one of those moments as well for the community here. The museum project will be one such moment as well, so you need those as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you engage with other municipalities to spread the impact of design across the whole nation?
Yeah. There are perhaps a couple of things. There's, of course, of what happens in Finland, but we are also quite a lot engaged in international discussions. So there are a couple of city networks. So the World Design Capital alumni network is one. There's for instance, now the time that I followed, so Valencia in Spain did really great work a couple of years ago. I served on the advisory board and have been having lots of chats with them. There's here in Europe, Frankfurt Rhine-Main area, we were just yesterday discussing this at what's happening in Germany and how those different things and how can we help each other is coming up in 26. There's a very interesting case at the moment of a twin city set up in US-Mexico border, so San Diego, Tijuana. They have, of course, their kind of own questions of what design and strategically design means in terms of bringing two communities across the border together. So there's that. And one thing, our mayor at the time, at the Design Capital Year time, Mr. Jussi Pajunen wanted to make sure that there's like a permanent kind of platform as well to discuss with other cities the importance of design. So we joined the UNESCO Design Cities Network in 2014. That's now, it's actually become a really big network. There's like, I'm not even sure what the current figure is because it's well over 40, but it's a global network. Again, there are very different setups in there, but then you kind of start identifying cities that you share issues with, so we try and do that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Then there is maybe one more question that goes through before, like, so I'll guess that one. How are design and service design defined within these initiatives? Is it due to their human-centered approach, their innovation, or the use of prototyping?
Well, this is the thing. So the place where you can really look at this is where it definitely happens, is all the projects that happen under the Service Design Partnership Agreement, and that's why that's kind of the place that we can very clearly get the briefs and the figures we do. We have kind of a service where we advise different departments that they have some idea how should they, we have tools that they can use, how do you build a design brief, what might be included in that, and it's kind of the figures that are coming out of that, or the impact, is something that we're very interested in developing forward to the future. Then, of course, where it becomes more difficult is, and that's perhaps a positive challenge, because, of course, increasingly different departments do their own design work, where they might not involve some external partner. Those cases, it will be harder to get the overall data in the city, or what that means. Or sometimes perhaps if there's work that happens technically under some other agreement, but if you really started looking into it, it would be design work. So the kind of getting that data can sometimes be tricky. I think the important thing is, and that certainly resonates with some of the talks of this morning, is the cultural aspect, that kind of mindset of the city being a service organization and working in a more human-centered way. Yeah.
One more question.
One more question, yes. Are they all coming from online? This is interesting.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah.
Because I think your role is quite unique, isn't it? So what is the role and responsibility area of a chief design officer in the city of Helsinki?
So, so this is the second edition. The first edition was it was kind of a little bit different, and it happened before Helsinki itself has gone through a huge organizational shuffle. And at that point, there was more a kind of perhaps like purely on a strategic level. We wanted to make sure that we can connect our design work both all the way up to the mayor's office and whatever goes on kind of those levels, and then dive deep down into operational levels as well. So many of the people working here are working on different kind of operational levels in the city, but also in how our entire kind of strategy work in the city is developing, how different other sort of strategic development of stuff in the city and how design becomes incorporated into that. Piritta over there is your person to speak about kind of the whole strategy development. We're going through the evaluation process of the current city strategy and building up to the next one. Then I kind of come in as the spokesperson, or the lobbyist, or the listener and interpreter. So very much where we might have space for new initiatives, or space where we somehow have to find the way for design to go in. So there's kind of the level of all the tools and the partnership agreements and keeping all of that running. That has kind of become it's kind of not questioned, it's there. We have to keep working on it and growing the impact, but it's something that is definitely part of the culture already. But then when we have to try and build new kind of bridges and areas, and increasingly also in the slightly harder service to evaluate the urban environment, so then I'm working a lot in that space. Yeah.
Is it like, because in Finland we have such a low hierarchy, but still it needs this kind of like, you're making space and removing the barriers and connecting the right people in the right tables. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I could say in general that the role of design in somewhere like a city is very much a connector and collaborator and bridge builder role, and that works on all levels where you can find design in the city. Whilst Finland is a pretty non-hierarchical society, of course, something like city administration, simply due to the size of it and due to kind of of course, certain like political processes and so is also hierarchical. So there's that, but design has sort of found a space in the city where we can kind of do this kind of movement and that kind of movement, and sometimes perhaps more sort of this kind of movement as well. So we try and be quite creative in how we do that collaborative work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Hanna.